How about let's go one by one?
Hmm.
Bench, squat, and deadlifts.
Hmm.
What are some like the body styles that are like advantageous for those movements?
Specifically for bench press is usually going to be the individuals that are little, not necessarily shorter, but they have more of a stocky build, more of this bigger individuals, because that's another thing too, and that I've found and a lot of other people will kind of subscribe to is that typically when numbers on the bench press start going up, like your body weight is very tied to that, right? You look at a lot of big bench press numbers and you start kind of seeing body weights, correlate, right? There's not a lot of guys that weigh 175 pounds that are benching well into the 400s. There may be some here and there, but not very many, right? Body weight is tied to that. So these bigger, stockier body types tend to be better. Again, you'll find exceptions, but the shorter your arms are, the less distance that you have to move the bar. So you're shorter, stockier arms, more of kind of this bigger barrel chest. Those guys tend to be very good on the bench, especially when they start training and um, really start to magnify some of those things that make them good at bench already. Like, well, I already had this stocky body type, and now that I started lifting, my muscle bellies are just, a little bit shorter, and I get fuller, and so now when I didn't have to press a bar as far, now I have to press it even less distance because now I got this big barrel chest and big arms, and everything is just moving this big weight, right? For squats, to be honest with you, a lot of guys that bench press pretty well, as long as they don't have knee problems and stuff like that, usually end up being pretty good squatters too, for the same reason. There's not a lot of people that kind of have like the short T-Rex arms, but have like long legs, right? That would be weird. I'm sure there's somebody out there like that, but generally, shorter arms, stockier build, the legs are going to kind of go with that too. And when you don't have to um, move that load when you're squatting as far, everything's a little bit more short and compact. Typically, and this can be developed through training or just again anthropomorphic. Like if you have that bodybuilder type of very narrow waist, abs chiseled out, it's not necessarily going to be the most advantageous thing for squatting because when you get into that hole and you got a lot of wiggle room in there, that's not doing you any favors. But now all of a sudden the guy's got a little bit of belly to him and can kind of fill up that space and kind of sink in there like a glove and rocket you out of the hole. Now all of a sudden this is the guy that's putting up big numbers on the squat. So typically that little bigger, thicker frame, thicker limbs, arms, legs, even torso is going to be more advantageous for that. Um, but oddly enough, then when you throw in the deadlift, things start to flip a little bit. That same guy or girl that was tearing it up on squat and bench because they were nice and short and stocky, they're coming down to get a deadlift bar and things aren't looking so sweet anymore. Right now, the guy that can, scratch his kneecaps without even bending over has the advantage because he doesn't have to move the weight as far, picking it up off of the floor because of his limbs, because of the size of his or her hands. If especially in scenarios where hook grip becomes a deal, right? Talking with Chris, I remember working with Chris. And I said, "Well, why don't you hook grip it, man?" "I can't. I got these little thumbs." And sure enough, I look at the yeah, you're gonna have a hard time hook gripping. Let's stick to alternator, right? But things like that tend to make people more of a natural deadlifter. Do you still have to train it? Yeah, of course. But the little bit leaner, longer frame tends to be a little bit more advantageous for deadlifters. So again, with some of that stuff, whether it's strongman, powerlifting, um, the goal of that athlete is to really kind of understand like where are you good already? Like where do your strengths lie? And as much as you can, like lean into your strengths because from a powerlifting standpoint, that's building up your total. You do still have to address your weak points though, but you kind of got to know where you're at. Like if you know that you're a strong bencher and a strong squatter because of your body type, that's what you like to do, that's what you're good at. Yes, you still need to be able to deadlift, but you better get a head start on squat and bench and beating most of these people in the meet because they're going to be, running at you fast from behind when we get to deadlifts, right? Or if you know that hey, I'm a big deadlifter. I'm not as, big of a squatter. I've got these long legs and, long femurs and whatever. Okay. Well, you better be able to just squat enough to stay in the mix and bench enough to stay in the mix. So that way you can catch them on deadlifts. So, it's about realizing where your strengths and leaning in. Same thing goes for strongman. Strongman even a little more so at times because you've got more events. You've got more areas, and strongman goes off of points, right? So you don't even necessarily have to get first place in every event in order to get first place for the meet. It's going off of points. So you can strategize a little bit more. So it's really about, every athlete has a toolbox. Some things you can add. You can add things like work capacity or more tissue, hypertrophy or things like that. But at some point, that athlete is who that athlete is. You can magnify that a little bit, but you're not going to turn that, skinny kid at 18 years old who's, 6'3" and 130 pounds soaking wet into, a 300-pound monster. It is probably not going to happen. He just doesn't have the genetics for that. Now, hey, maybe that kid that's, in ninth grade that's already 6'3" and 240 pounds, like, that's the kid that's going to be this probably big, strong man, big bodied lineman thrower. Like, you could see it coming. So some of it is just, you got what you got, lean into it. Or just take on the challenge of like, hey, maybe I'm not really built for this, but I like the challenge of being able to go against the grain. I never thought I could be this strong. Like, I've always been kind of skinny and whatever, and never thought I was strong, but let me see how much I get. Great, or do that. But, you're going to have to kind of realize that, especially with this and in life in general, everybody's got advantages. Everybody has things that make them good at what they do. So, yeah.
I was actually watching a video. This was a while ago. I didn't know anything about strongman until, I used to watch a while ago until I saw some of the events where these guys are sprinting. And I thought it was just like powerlifting where it's raw strength. But I was like, you need conditioning with this. It's similar to CrossFit. Big guys moving big weights as fast as possible, and you need like conditioning. Like that's quite a feat.
And a lot
actually,
of those events are, it's for time. You got to do this for a minute. So now it's heavyweight and not a powerlifting where, okay, do it one time and let's see what you could do. This may be heavyweight and you got to keep going nonstop for a minute. And if your gas tank is emptied after that, well, good luck doing the 5 other events that you got coming on the rest of the day. Or even, I've seen this too at some of these higher levels, some of these invitational events. It's not a one-day competition. This is multiple day competition. So if you get into a certain placing in one day, okay, great, that opens you up the next day. Well, if you just gassed out in this first day and you got nothing left, you're not going to do well that second day. So yeah, it's a lot more of a conditioning element. Not necessarily the best athlete, if you could say, in terms of change of direction and agility and jumping and stuff like that, but definitely more athletic in the traditional sense than something like a powerlifting. Powerlifting really focusing on that static element and that max effort type of strength versus strongman. It depends. It depends on the show director. It depends on the lift that they're doing. They do have sometimes to where it's, hey, 1 rep max, you work up as much as you can on this event. But then they may have others that it's max reps. They have other movement events, and you're looking at 5 or 6 different events in one competition typically. So, being able to, have a bit more of a gas tank recovery, things like that come into play. But interestingly enough, most of these individuals aren't any less strong because of it. So it's kind of funny. I myself have really started to venture a lot, unless we're really in like a meet prep type of scenario, for some of my powerlifters that compete. A lot more of their training is looking almost kind of like this hybrid between like a strong man and a powerlifting because of that very thing. I've seen powerlifters' totals go up just as a product of doing a lot of these strongman type of lifts or infusing those type of elements within their training, because it helps to balance out that profile, right? You've got push, pull, squat, hinge, carry, lunge, like all these type of things that the body does and how it can move. And so when you pick 3 of those elements and you focus on them exclusively, you may be leaving a lot of other things on the table. Not necessarily saying that strongman goes and just checks all the other boxes, but it does check more than powerlifting. So as a byproduct, some of those things come in handy. If your work capacity is better because you've been doing more than 5 reps a set on stuff, then you can increase your volume. Well, if you can increase your volume, you can get bigger, then you can get stronger. Like all these things kind of help funnel back to strength in general. But strongman tends to focus more on general strength and general movement patterns, hence with the shows always being different, movements kind of, versus powerlifting is more that specific strength. Doesn't matter what federation that you go to, you're going to do a squat, a bench, and a deadlift, and there's going to be 3 attempts on each, and you got to max out on all of them, right? Like they may have little nuances, but it's generally the same versus could even be the same federation, the same show, promoter or director, and it's going to be completely different from one show to the next. So being able to be strong in general and being able to exhibit that strength on whatever's in front of you that day, right? So that type of strength is obviously for strongman, that's their bread and butter. But I've noticed not only for powerlifting, but for a lot of other things too, soldiers, other athletes, that whole just be strong and show up and just be able to do whatever's in front of you, eat whatever's on your plate for that day, that tends to bode well for most things, right? So you tend to train somebody in that way and then just say, oh, you got a powerlifting meet coming up? Okay, cool. Like we'll get a little specific for about like 8 weeks, trim it down, and then boom, go do that. Oh, you're in the military, you got an AFT coming up? Okay, no worries. Like we'll polish that up, throw a little running in, 8 weeks, boom, you're good. Like that, I'm strong enough for whatever's in front of me type of mentality. It helps a lot. So I'll definitely tip my hat to strongman for that.